The early morning sun stretched its golden fingers across the vast wilderness of South Africa's wildlife reserve. The air carried a cool crispness, the kind that hinted at a new day full of possibilities. Birds were beginning to chirp their morning melodies, and the occasional rustle in the bushes betrayed the movements of unseen creatures. It was a world untamed, beautiful, and, at times, perilous. Yet, nestled within this wild expanse, a heart-wrenching scene was unfolding, a scene that would become one of the most extraordinary stories ever told. On a dusty road cutting through the reserve, a young boy no older than 4 sat hunched over, his tiny frame shaking with sobs. His cries echoed through the stillness, piercing the serenity of the wilderness. His clothes were tattered, his face streaked with dirt and tears. Clutched tightly in his little hands was a teddy bear, its one soft fur now matted and worn. He was utterly alone, abandoned in a place where no child should ever be. The question of how he had ended up there was a mystery that would haunt the reserve staff for days to come. But for now, the boy's cries painted a picture of sheer vulnerability, his small form dwarfed by the vastness of the untamed land around him. Every sob seemed to plead for someone, anyone, to come to his rescue. Yet there were no humans in sight, no comforting arms to scoop him up and whisper that everything would be okay, just the wild and the unknown dangers ahead. Then, from the thick bushes lining the road, came a sound that froze the boy mid-sob, a low, rumbling growl, the kind of growl that sent a chill racing down your spine, primal and unmistakably wild. Slowly, emerging from the shadows of the dense foliage, was a massive lion. His golden mane seemed to glow in the morning light, and his piercing amber eyes locked onto the boy. Each step he took was deliberate, his muscular frame radiating power and grace. He was the king of this domain, a creature to be revered and feared. The boy's tears dried instantly, replaced by wide, terrified eyes. He clutched his teddy bear tighter, his small hands trembling. The lion's presence was overwhelming, a force of nature so close that the boy could hear the soft rustle of his paws against the dirt. The two of them were locked in a moment of unspoken tension, the boy too young to run, too scared to cry, and the lion too curious to look away. This lion was no ordinary predator. His name was Scout, a name that carried weight within the reserve. He was known to the rangers and staff as a protector, a lion who had grown up under extraordinary circumstances. Years ago, Scout had been found as a cub, orphaned and alone, much like the boy now sitting before him. It had been Ranger Sam who discovered him, a tiny ball of fur trembling in the shadows of his slain mother. Against all odds, Sam had raised Scout, nurturing him until he was strong enough to return to the wild. But Scout had never forgotten the kindness of humans, and though he roamed freely, there was a bond between him and the rangers that was unbreakable. Today, however, Scout was faced with something he had never encountered before, a human child in distress. His instincts, honed over years of survival in the wild, told him this boy was no threat. But there was something else, something deeper, that held Scout's attention. Perhaps it was the boy's vulnerability, so eerily reminiscent of his own as a cub. Or perhaps it was the unmistakable sound of a heart breaking, a sound that resonated with the lion in a way no one could have predicted. Scout paused just a few feet away from the boy, his massive frame towering over the tiny figure. He sniffed the air, his sharp senses taking in the child's scent. The boy didn't move, his wide eyes fixed on the lion's every motion. And then something extraordinary happened. Scout, the king of the wild, let out a low, rumbling growl, not of aggression, but of reassurance. It was a sound that seemed to say, "You are not alone." The boy blinked, his tears forgotten. He tilted his head slightly, as if trying to understand this unexpected turn of events. The lion, sensing no danger, circled the boy slowly, his golden eyes scanning the surroundings. It was as if Scout had taken on the role of a guardian, his presence a shield against the unseen threats of the wild. He didn't roar, didn't bare his teeth, he simply watched, his powerful frame a silent promise of protection. Miles away, unaware of the miraculous encounter unfolding in the heart of the reserve, Ranger Sam was starting his morning patrol. For Sam, the reserve was more than just a workplace. It was a sanctuary, a place where he felt connected to something greater than himself. As he navigated the familiar trails in his Jeep, his mind wandered to Scout. He hadn't seen the lion in weeks, but that was normal. Scout was a creature of the wild, and Sam respected his freedom. Still, there was a part of him that missed the silent understanding they shared, the bond forged in Scout's cubhood. As Sam rounded a bend in the road, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. There, just ahead, was Scout. The sight of the lion standing in the middle of the road was enough to make him slam on the brakes. But it wasn't just Scout that caught his attention. It was the small figure sitting at the lion's feet. A child, alone, vulnerable, and completely at the mercy of the king of the wild. Sam's breath caught in his throat as a wave of panic surged through him. He had seen what lions were capable of, had witnessed their raw power in action. Every instinct screamed at him to act, to intervene before it was too late. But as he watched, frozen in disbelief, he realized something was different. Scout wasn't attacking the boy. In fact, he seemed to be protecting him. The lion's body language was calm, almost gentle, as he stood guard over the child. It was a scene so surreal, so unlike anything Sam had ever witnessed, that for a moment he wondered if he was dreaming. Slowly, carefully, Sam stepped out of the Jeep. He didn't want to startle Scout or frighten the boy. His voice was steady, though his heart was racing. "Hey there, little guy," he called softly, his eyes never leaving Scout. "It's okay. I'm here to help." The boy didn't respond. His wide eyes flickered between Sam and the lion, as if trying to decide who posed the greater threat. But Scout didn't move. He simply stood there, his golden eyes locked on Sam, his presence a silent warning to tread carefully. Sam took another step forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Scout," he said gently, his voice tinged with the familiarity of years spent together. "It's okay. I've got this." For a moment, Scout remained still, his gaze unyielding. Then, as if understanding Sam's words, the lion let out a low growl. Not of anger, but of acknowledgement. He stepped back, giving Sam the space he needed to approach the boy. The ranger's heart ached as he knelt down, taking in the child's tear-streaked face and trembling hands. "Hey, buddy," Sam whispered, his voice as soft as the breeze. "You're safe now. I've got you." The boy blinked up at him, his fear slowly giving way to trust. For the first time since the encounter began, he reached out, his tiny hand clutching Sam's. And in that moment, as man and boy stood under the watchful eyes of a lion, the wilderness seemed to hold its breath. This was no ordinary day in the reserve. It was a day that would be etched into Sam's memory forever. A day when the lines between man and beast blurred, and the wild revealed its heart. As Sam carried the boy back to the safety of the Jeep, Scout watched from the shadows, his golden eyes glowing in the morning light. And though he eventually disappeared into the bush, his presence lingered, a silent guardian of the wild. For Sam, and for the boy whose life was forever changed, Scout would always be more than just a lion. He was a protector, a symbol of the unspoken bond between humans and nature. And in the quiet moments of the reserve, when the wind rustled the leaves and the sun bathed the land in its golden glow, Sam often found himself looking to the horizon, wondering if Scout was watching. Because in his heart, he knew the king of the wild was never far away. It was an ordinary morning in one of South Africa's most remote wildlife reserves. The sky was still tinged with the early morning light, and the air was cool, a gentle breeze rustling through the trees. The sounds of nature slowly began to stir, birds calling, distant rustlings, but something wasn't right. There was an unsettling silence in the vast wilderness, a silence that would soon be broken. On the side of a dusty road, a young boy sat alone. His tiny body, no more than 4 years old, was hunched over as sobs racked his small frame. His little hands wiped his tear-streaked face, but nothing could stop the flood of emotion overwhelming him. He was lost, alone, in the middle of the wild, the reserve, a place where nature's beauty met the untamed power of the wild, wasn't a place for a child to be. The boy's cries echoed through the empty landscape, but there was no one around. No people, no vehicles, just him and the vast, unforgiving wilderness stretching out before him. How had he ended up there? No one knew. Miles away, in the heart of the reserve, a lion named Scout stirred. His keen senses picked up something out of place, an unfamiliar scent on the wind. Scout, a majestic lion, was no stranger to the reserve. Raised here, far from the dangers of poachers and the prying eyes of tourists, he had grown strong and fierce. But there was something about him that was different. Over the years, Scout had developed an unusual bond with the humans in the reserve, especially with one ranger, Sam. Sam had saved Scout's life when he was just a cub. His mother had been killed by poachers, and Sam had taken the small, vulnerable cub under his wing. Scout had grown up learning the ways of the wild, but always with a sense of connection to the humans who had cared for him. On that particular morning, something stopped him. Something in the air made him pause. His powerful nose sniffed the wind again, more intently now. The scent, it was wrong. Not just unfamiliar, but troubling. Instinctively, Scout's muscles tensed, and he began to move toward the source. His eyes narrowed as he walked, his powerful body blending seamlessly into the shadows of the bush. He had no idea what he would find, but something told him it was important. As he neared the road, his golden eyes locked onto a small, fragile figure sitting alone in the dust. The boy, lost and vulnerable, still didn't see the lion approaching. He continued to sob uncontrollably, his body shaking as his tiny hands tried to wipe away his tears. Scout, however, kept his distance at first. He circled the boy cautiously, watching, observing. There was something about this child, something in the boy's cries that seemed to stir something deep within Scout. The boy wasn't just lost, he was helpless, and the lion could sense it. As Scout moved closer, his massive frame nearly invisible in the bush, he paused. The boy's sobs grew louder, and with it, Scout's hesitation. Could this really be what it seemed? A small, helpless child, all alone in the heart of the reserve, with no one to protect him? It was then that Scout made a decision. The lion, his eyes still fixed on the boy, let out a deep, rumbling roar. The sound was thunderous, shaking the very ground beneath him. It echoed across the reserve, the roar of a lion that could command the wilderness. The boy's cries stopped instantly. He froze, his wide eyes staring at the lion, tears drying on his cheeks. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The lion's eyes never left him. The child's eyes never left the lion. They shared a brief but profound connection, an unspoken understanding. But this wasn't a threat. It wasn't an attack. It was something else, something that neither the boy nor the lion could fully comprehend. At that very moment, Ranger Sam was out on his morning patrol, completely unaware of the strange scene unfolding in the reserve. As he drove his jeep through the winding paths of the reserve, he focused on the quiet beauty of his surroundings, the towering trees, the distant call of birds, the serenity of the wild. But as he rounded a bend in the road, his heart skipped a beat. There, in the middle of the road, was Scout, and standing near the lion was the boy. Sam slammed on the brakes, his pulse racing. He could see the lion's massive frame, blocking the road, its golden eyes locked onto the child. The ranger's mind raced. Was Scout attacking the boy? Was the child in danger? He quickly jumped out of the jeep, his boots hitting the dust with a soft thud. His heart was pounding in his chest as he approached the scene, fear gnawing at him. He knew Scout had raised him from a cub. He knew how fierce and powerful the lion could be. And yet, as Sam drew closer, he was stunned by what he saw. Scout wasn't attacking the boy. In fact, he was standing motionless beside him, his body calm, his stance protective. It was as if the lion was guarding the boy, standing watch over him, offering protection where no one else could. Sam stood frozen for a moment, disbelief washing over him. The lion he had known so well, the fierce predator of the wild, was now acting like a protector. There was something powerful, almost mystical in that moment. Sam could see it in Scout's eyes. The lion wasn't just guarding the boy from danger. He was trying to communicate something. Slowly, Sam took a few cautious steps forward. His voice was a soft whisper. "Hey there, little guy. Are you okay?" The boy didn't respond at first. His wide eyes flickered between Sam and the lion, a mix of fear and confusion in his gaze. The boy was clearly shaken, his body tense. But there was something else there, too, a strange sense of calm in the lion's presence. The boy, despite his fear, didn't seem to feel threatened by Scout. Sam spoke again, this time more gently. "It's okay. You're safe now. We're going to get you back to where you belong." The boy still didn't speak. He just shook his head, his face pale, his eyes filled with confusion. It was clear to Sam that the boy had been alone for longer than just a few minutes. His clothes were torn, his skin dirty, and his small hands clutched a stuffed bear as if it was his only comfort. As Sam moved closer, he reached into his pocket for his radio, planning to call for help. But as soon as he touched the device, Scout turned his head and let out a low growl. Sam froze. This wasn't a threatening growl. It was a warning. The warning wasn't directed at Sam. It felt different. It felt like a warning about whoever had left the boy in such a vulnerable state. The growl seemed to be a message. Something was amiss in the reserve, and the boy wasn't just lost. There was more to this than met the eye. Sam's heart sank. Could something have happened to the boy's family? Had they been in danger? The thought made his stomach turn. What had happened before the boy was left all alone in the wild? Just as Sam was about to speak again, the sound of an approaching vehicle cut through the tension. Another jeep appeared around the bend. It was David, one of the other rangers, who had been searching for the boy ever since the call came in from his frantic parents hours earlier. David slammed on the brakes when he saw the scene before him. He hurried out of the vehicle, his voice filled with concern as he asked, "Is he okay?" Sam nodded, but his eyes remained on Scout, who had moved back into the shadows of the bush, still watching the boy from a distance. It was as though the lion had decided his role was done, that it was now time for the humans to take over. "He's safe now," Sam said quietly, his voice full of gratitude. "But we need to get him out of here." David quickly moved to the boy's side, taking his small hand and guiding him toward the jeep. The boy, though clearly shaken, didn't resist. He seemed to know, on some instinctual level, that he was being led to safety. As Sam watched them drive away, he couldn't help but look back at Scout, who stood quietly in the shadows, his golden eyes glowing in the fading light. For a brief moment, the wild seemed less savage and more mystical. The lion had known what to do. It wasn't just luck that Scout had found the boy. It was something deeper, something more connected. As David's jeep drove toward the reserve's main gate, Sam followed closely behind. His mind was swirling. What had happened to the boy's family? How had Scout known that the boy needed protection? The answers would come in time, but the moment the lion had spent guarding the boy would stay with Sam forever. There was something special about the bond between humans and the animals of the reserve, and that bond in this case had saved a life. It was a connection that went beyond logic, beyond understanding. It was something that could only be felt in the quiet moments when nature's power and beauty converged.